Hello. I hope you all can hear me. The more observant of you may have noticed that I'm not George Turner. Sadly, George is ill, so I'm the emergency stand-in. So I hope you get the most out of this. My name is Paul Sanders, and I've been a photographer most of my life, and for some reason my clicker's stopped working. We'll do it that way. And I've been a news and sport photographer for pretty much all my life until the last 7 years. One of the reasons I'm going to talk to you today is about the gentle touch that we need to apply. I used to have to, in my role as picture editor of the Times, look at around about 20,000 images a day. There are 20,000 pictures on that screen at the moment, and if you can imagine looking through 20,000 pictures, you can understand why I don't like to spend too much time actually sitting behind the computer editing my pictures. I'm the kind of person who tries to get it right in camera and get as much done actually in the field as possible, rather than trying to do it and then fix it later. So my work now is very much a very calm, muted sort of approach to photography, and I like the time and space involved in being outside. I don't enjoy rushing. I used to have to rush a lot. When you're going through 20,000 pictures, you tend not to actually see very many of them. So photography for me now is more of a sort of a meditation on me. I'm not a big fan of bright light. I'm not a big fan of golden light. Most of my work is black and white. And I like working in bad weather. I have a little saying that close friends know, and that is, when it's sunny, a little bit of me dies. So if I go out in the morning and it's golden light, perfect dawn, that most people get really excited about, I'm the person with my head in my hands, shaking my head, going, I really should just go home because it's not working. I would rather stand for 18 minutes in the rain doing long exposure pictures than stand for a morning in the sunshine. I don't use a lot of Photoshop or Lightroom techniques in my work because I prefer to be really subtle. I like that sort of the gentle sort of disappearing of things. I don't like everything overdone, and I do find that one of the big mistakes we make, and I certainly made it as a sort of a beginner to landscape work, is that I would overdo everything. And actually I found that by working in tune with what I'm seeing, the sort of more gentle approach is a lot better, because nature isn't turned up to 11, or 100, depending on which sliders you're using. It's usually around about 2 or 3, or some mornings in the negatives. So the most I tend to do is just sort of tiny, tiny tweaks when I get back. So I'll shoot things and pay particular attention to getting them right in the morning, or as close to right as I can. The big things I pay attention to are things like symmetry and composition, because those are the things that you can't fix later. There are small things you can do, and I don't believe in taking things out of pictures later on, or putting things on, or changing colours particularly. But what I do enjoy is just the gentle enhancements that you can make. Most of my pictures are very, very simplistic. I like a very minimalist feel. I like things to be empty. But even if something is a bit cluttered, I still won't sort of mess around with it. In this one particular picture, you see the seaweed on the side of the rails. I'm always asked why I don't take it out and make the picture perfect. Well, for me, nature isn't perfect. For me, nature has imperfections, and it's the differences in things that, to me, make the picture more appealing. If everything was really kind of sterile, I wouldn't get anything out of it. So I enjoy the fact that there's a sort of an integrity to them for me, and that comes from my news photographer background. As a news photographer, you're not allowed to take stuff out, put stuff in, or alter things too much. And having been a news photographer over 20 years, that sort of sticks with me. I am getting better. I do now kind of adjust little bits, but nothing major. So I will go out in the morning and work in very dull, flat conditions, and I'll get the most out of the files by using filters in the field and getting the most out of the histogram and the exposure that I'm using, and sort of getting the maximum information I can in the files, so that when I get back, then I can start to sort of just tweak and sort of adjust as I need to. The pictures that I generally take are usually between 4 and 20 minutes in exposure time. Some are a bit less, but mostly 4 and 20 minutes. And then the panoramas like this one I'll stitch together sort of quite carefully in Photoshop later. But all the exposure is done at the time of taking. And I find it easier to put that in and then just pull it a little bit when I get home, rather than just sort of do it all later. I really believe that the differences that we have between us, the way we see things, is what makes us quite unique. So I don't want to have my pictures look the same as everybody else's. It's a way of me sort of being present, really, when I work. I enjoy the sort of the standing there and looking at the way the tones work naturally, and then I try to reproduce that when I get home. Every single emotion I have is poured into my pictures. Every time I sort of start to work on a picture, I'll spend a lot of time looking and feeling the location before I actually even can begin to take the camera out of the bag. And before I even get that far, I'll be imagining what the print is going to look like. Because for me, the final print is the most important thing with the picture. They're not real photographs unless you actually print them out. And it's quite enjoyable just spending time walking around and looking and assessing what's there and looking at the things that occur naturally, rather than sort of rushing at it, shooting the heart out of it, and then going home and being disappointed. I would rather go home with 1 or 2 files that I really like than thousands of pictures that I've then got to edit and be disappointed with. So this softness that I talk about, this gentle light that you get when you're working in flat conditions, is beautiful. And most people will go home when the light's rubbish. They'll go home, but I'm a big believer in you work with what you're given. And if you're given rubbish light, bad conditions, just actually embrace it. Don't think of it as a negative. Think of it as a positive, because you'll probably get something better than the next person, because they're at home drinking coffee and eating cake while you're outside freezing your backside off or getting soaked. And there's something quite exhilarating about being the only person taking pictures in the rain, because you know you're going to get something special. I often shoot under moonlight as well. I love the fact that when you shoot under moonlight, a lot disappears. I shoot very low ISO under moonlight, so a lot of the pictures are quite long exposures. But the wonderful thing about that is that the whole sort of gentleness of the image comes through in a different way. The textures and tones all work in a whole new way. And I get scared of the dark. For some bizarre reason, I still sleep with a light on, and I'm 50. But it's one of those things, being outside with every sense kind of electrified by being out on your own in the middle of the night. When you go home, you can kind of pour all that into your work, into your translation of the picture. And as long as you've got all the information there, when you start working on the file at home, if you've got it all, you don't have to do very much. You can just tiny tweaks here and there. I don't only shoot low key, I shoot very flat high key stuff. I don't know whether you can actually see anything there. It's very high key, but just church windows. I love simplicity in my pictures. And I like little things that just catch my eye. I don't sort of put myself in a box and say I only do one sort of photography. I tend to cover as much ground as I can when I'm shooting. But I really enjoy actually just getting the final image, taking it from the camera, putting it into Lightroom, and feeling what I felt when I took the picture. It's that connection, and it goes all the way through from standing outside in the rain to the computer to the print. You've got to have that connection all the way through your work. You can't force it. You can't make it happen. It just sort of starts to develop. So I'm going to show you a little bit of how I work. It's not going to be a kind of a live, loads of sliders demonstration, mainly because I've never done one of those before. So I thought I'd do it the way that I'm comfortable with. The way that I work is very, very simple. The left-hand slide, as you look at it, is the basic frame. There's no filtration on it at all, and I'll expose for the shadow areas at the bottom of those rocks, and I'll let the highlights blow out. I'll control the highlights by pulling in a graduated filter So the middle frame has the graduated filter dropped in. And you can see the sky just coming back. I ended up using a slightly stronger one for this picture. And the last frame is the neutral density filter added. And that enables me to stretch the exposure out. I often shoot just in black and white, so I shoot RAW and JPEG, usually RAW, using the RAWs if I get a bit stuck, mainly using the JPEGs. So when I get home, if I've used the RAW as in this case, I then just turn it black and white and just tweak the contrast a little bit or the brightness. I usually make my pictures darker rather than lighter. And for me, it's quite an interesting little journey because I have in my head this image of what it was like when I was standing there, and what I'm trying to do is recreate that, but in a really soft and gentle way. So I'm going to take you through my workflow with one picture now. So this is a place up in Glencoe, very, oh, gone back one too many, sorry. Very wet, very rainy day, very flat light, howling gale, the wind blowing in my face, and I'm sat up on top of a rock with my umbrella, waiting for the rain to stop, and I was shooting between the showers. I find that when I go to a place, I connect with a place on a very sort of spiritual level, and I find Glencoe works better in the pouring rain because it's very much more ominous. And I like the fact the mountains kind of lean right over the top of you, and you're down on the valley, you're very small in the place. So I went up there to try and get a picture on the day that it was chucking it down with rain. In my head, I've already got an idea for the way the print is going to look and probably the way I'm going to frame it. So I don't like colour. Colour disturbs me a lot. So, like I say, I'll shoot in black and white. When I get home and the raws flick in and they're colour, I often take a step backwards because they're a bit all over the place. I'm the least technical photographer you'll ever meet. I very rarely worry about what my white balance is doing. I never care about what my meter says. I only go on what the screen on the back of the camera tells me. So I shoot with a Fuji GFX, so I'm looking at the actual file that I'm shooting. All that technical information doesn't bother me at all. It's only on the feel on the back of the screen. And then I take that feel and just enhance it when I get home. So I've got home, I've stepped back in shock because it's colour. And then I'll turn it black and white using the Lightroom black and white setting. And that tends to sort of, because I've used the raw light, tends to be a little bit flatter. I always try and shoot with a film simulation on the back of the camera and then apply it again when I get home. So I've added in the Acrobat red setting, which is my favourite. I'm an old school kind of film person. I always had a red or orange filter on my camera when I was shooting film in black and white, and I don't suppose I've ever really grown up from that. Once I've done that, I start to look into the image and think, okay, what was it about the place that was really turning me on? What was getting me excited? And then I'll start to work on the area. So what I've done now is I've just reduced the exposure a little bit, tweaked the contrast a tiny bit, but you can see those sliders have only moved a little bit. But in that, the mountains in the background have started to come down, and it's starting to get to where I want it to be. I rarely shoot with a lens that will get the full hyperfocal distance. I rarely shoot with f/22 or whatever, if I can help it, because I find that it sort of disturbs it. I don't know what I was up there, but because I actually like the sort of the depth of field as it sort of lessens off to enhance that feeling of distance. I don't see like sharp front to back when I look at something naturally, so I don't actually think, for me, it should be sharp front to back. Maybe I'm a bit unusual in that. But I make great use of radial filters. I think they're a wonderful thing. So all I've done here is I've put the radial filter on and I've inverted it so that I can bring the background down a little bit. And then in applying another one, I just tweak the clarity, sort of 2 or 3%, just to make that little rock in the foreground pop a little bit. And I find that just doing little bits here and there, you can bring it out. It's very much like black and white printing. It's sort of, you're drawing the best out of little bits of the image. I don't want to go over and do massive amounts to it because I've got most of the feeling right in the camera. I'm just enhancing it, just stroking it to where I want it to be. And it's a relationship with the image, a bit like the relationship with somebody you love. You wouldn't go up to somebody you love and slap them in the face to get their attention. You might gently ask them or quietly ask them, if they would do something for you. You do the same with a picture. You gently bring out the best in it that works for you. You don't worry about what other people might think. You don't worry about what judges in camera clubs might think. You worry about how it feels to you. And that's what I try to do, is I'll bring out the picture in the best way that I know how, which is to gently bring out the subtle nuances that I could see while I was sat there for a long time. So I'll sit and watch the way the light shifts around and just pull those little bits. And I'll just tweak the contrast here and there just to develop a feeling of what I'm trying to get. Now, flat light is quite interesting to work in because a lot of people just sort of shy away from it. But I think if you sort of just embrace that light and work with what you're given, you'll be surprised at the results you get, and then come back, and in the way that flat light is very gentle, just be gentle with it. There's no need to try and force the contrast. If you try and make it look like it was something it wasn't, everybody will know. We're all fairly clued up onto the way things should look. So if you've got a foggy day and you've ramped the contrast up too much, everybody's going to know it's not going to work, unless it really works for you, of course. So it's being subtle, it's being light, it's being very gentle and very delicate. And that's the only way you should be. The tools that we have on our computers are there to aid, to build an improvement. They're not there to make something that's bad into something brilliant. If something's bad when you take it, no matter what you do to it, it's going to be bad. So spend a bit more time in the field developing it and have a bit of integrity about what you're doing, and then just pull the gentleness out of it, and you'll find that you'll actually enjoy it a lot more. You'll also be spending a lot more time taking pictures than sat behind your computer, which is what I personally hate.